Welcome to the Fathering Strong podcast, where we connect, engage, and empower fathers to be the best dads they can be for their families and communities. And now, your hosts are Bruce Stapleton and Pastor Eli Williams.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Eli Williams. I'm a husband, a father, a grandfather, and I'm the author of the book Father Love. I'm also a pastor at New Hope Church in Springfield, where I work alongside Kevin Munn to pastor that church, and the president of Urban Light Ministries, which is the nonprofit that powers Fathering Strong. We're so glad you're joining us today. I'm excited. We have a guest today, and I'll tell you about him in just a minute. But first, I want to talk a little bit about this week's blog post, which I want to urge you to read. Raising children is filled with both joys and challenges, and that's not really a newsflash for anyone watching or listening who has raised children. But things can get really complicated when there are marital problems, when there is separation, when there is divorce. It can be extremely difficult for a father to raise daughters during all of that. Now, sons, of course, but I've never raised a daughter, but I hear that it can be very, very challenging in a different way. My guest today on the podcast is going to tell you his story about the challenges of all of that and a little bit more about who he is. He is my friend. His name is Josh Taylor. Welcome, Josh. We're excited to have you as our guest today. So in this week's Fathering Strong podcast, I talked about the importance of mutual respect and, during a marital breakup and afterward, especially when children are involved. I'd like for you to share your story about that and other things related to your parenting journey as a girl dad of two beautiful daughters. Now, we already know each other, but to help our audience learn a little bit about who you are, let's start with the story of your early life. Tell us about that.
Man, absolutely. First of all, again, my name is Josh Taylor, and it's an absolute honor to be a part of this. I remember when my daughters were young and kind of as life was unfolding, I remember asking God, I'm like, why would you give me daughters? I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm like, I'm a mess myself. Like, oh my goodness. Is there any particular place you want me to start? Just, some of the conversations we've had?
Why don't you start with your boyhood? Just give us a little bit about your background.
Okay. So born and raised here in Springfield. Mom and dad are both still alive. Incredible parents. I love them both dearly. And when I was 3 years old, they parted ways. They separated. And back at that age, you don't know what trauma is, and no one really. And I don't know how much that was, a thing back then. How much more aware people were of it. But we don't realize how traumatic that is for children at a young age. So they divorced. I was 3. They'd been married for 8 years. And I don't remember specific exact time frames of everything, but I'm going to do the best I can to share that stuff as closely as I can. But I do remember them both marrying fairly, I don't want to say fairly quickly, but it was within a year or so after the divorce. So I remember more, of course, being with my mom because I lived with her, and my dad lived in he had moved to Marysville. Mom lived here in Springfield. She remarried, which was her second husband. And when I look back at that, I didn't realize that there was a problem until the problem was ongoing. It wasn't just something that just kind of happened one day. It was an ongoing thing. So that guy was supportive financially. Overall, he seemed like that was, the guy to go to. But behind the closed doors, there was abuse taking place. And whether he acknowledges that or is accepting of that or not is irrelevant. No one gets to determine or dictate what you took as abuse. and not everybody. The levels of abuse, they're all different. There are some levels that you have your extremes, and then you have your ones that just don't seem as extreme. But either one still causes a problem. It still messes with the psychological part of your mind and your development in your early childhood days. So you mix divorce, you mix abuse. Molestation hit my family when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I'm not bringing up anybody's names, but that's, again, one of those things where typically you're conditioned by that thing. You're assured by the abuser that this is totally normal at a young age, and that was what started the unfolding of that happening. It didn't last very long, but that was a root of a problem that's going to come out later on in this conversation. Mm-hmm. So go through childhood. I remember not having the consistent life spoken over me of, you're a good boy, you're doing great, I'm proud of you, you're smart, you're intelligent, all those things. And we don't realize in our own kid's life how imperative it is for those things to be spoken.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. In fact, we believe in that wholeheartedly and try to encourage dads to speak over their children, to bless them. That's the way it's spoken of in Scripture. A father should lay hands on his child and speak life into him and tell him about his future and how special he is to him. And when that's missing, it's really a part of a father wound that we men carry around even into adulthood.
Absolutely. So through that, I do remember going to my dad's every other weekend. That was just, as a child, you just accept what you're given. Like, you don't really have a choice. Obviously, none of us would choose that option in life, but when you don't have that option, you just kind of start living in what seems normal, but in reality, you start surviving. You start living in survival mode. You start, you start that spirit that's inside you that's supposed to be flourishing and coming out. When you have someone that is intimidating you and kind of belittling you and just making you feel like you're more in the way than you are welcome, that stuff just pushes down everything that's supposed to be flourishing within you, and that stuff carries on into your teen years, into your adulthood. That is why there's so many broken men walking around, because they didn't have that being poured into them as young men, because you have divorce, you've got violence, you've got abuse, you've got all these things that are just being perpetuated on kids, and they grow into adults, and everybody starts going, that person's garbage, like they just this, they're that, they start casting judgment. I mean, you have no idea what that person's been through. So back to them, back to the marriages. I think they were married for about 11 to 12 years apiece on their second marriages. Ironically, they both divorced similarly close to each other. And again, I can't give specific years. I don't remember those.
Sure.
But there's a lot going on in that, and there's a lot that the kids go through, and we just say kids are resilient. Yeah, they are, but why are we blaming the kids for acting out when they become teenagers? Like, you're not addressing the root of the problem.
Yes.
And so with all of those things unfolding and all of that kind of just taking its toll on me over life, I start my dating scene. I was 17 when I got my first girlfriend, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was just dating. Like, there was no real structured guidance on, hey, this is how you pursue, this is how you act, this is the things you do, this is the things you look out for, these are the red flags. because my parents, and again, I understand this. When I talk about my parents, they are incredible. Like, I talked to both of them today. They're phenomenal individuals. And I know that they did the absolute best that they could with what they knew at the time in life. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we're not aware of is past traumas from even our parents and grandparents. Those things get passed along. It becomes generational. Until someone cuts that thing off, it's going to keep impacting the family. It's just going to hit that bloodline and keep traveling on and keep traveling on. Yep. And pride, ego start taking effect, making you go, I'm fine, I don't need anything, I don't need to talk to somebody, I'm not going to sit there and talk to someone about my problems. That's all you're not healing in that process. You're avoiding. That's just, you're not on a healing journey. You're just avoiding and keeping it all pressed down and thinking you're doing okay. Well, really, you're doing, not only you're doing a disservice to yourself and others around you, but your own life. And that's what I was doing.
And then you have children.
And then I had children.
Right. So on the other side of this break, we want you to share with us what it was like becoming a father. All right. Stay with us. This is the Fathering Strong podcast. My guest is Josh Taylor, and we'll be back with him right after this.
We dads and father figures need each other. We need a safe, non-judgmental place to share our stories, challenges, heartaches, and joys. Fathering Strong is just such a place. A new online community of connected, engaged, and empowered fathers. Learn more at www.fatheringstrong.com.
Welcome back, friends. I'm Eli Williams. Josh Taylor is my guest today. He is a girl dad extraordinaire, but we'll get to all that. Let's start at the beginning of your fatherhood journey. Josh, what was it like becoming a dad for the first time?
Terrifying, because I was like, I didn't really think about it at the time, but I had no idea what to expect. I didn't really grow up around babies or anything like that. I had Lindsay, was my sister, and I remember a little bit of that, but I didn't really take part in the raising of her, much less any kids. So come home and just life is unfolding. I got married in 2005. We had our first daughter, Elizabeth, in January of 2007. And when you said father extraordinaire, I look up and she's just got this giant smile on her face because so that was it seemed easy because you're just changing diapers, you're going through the process, but I didn't realize the impact that I was having in the development of who she was becoming. I just thought, well, we're thrown into life and then we just develop however. There's a whole leading process that's left out in a lot of kids' life, and we're just expected them to flourish because though you're just supposed to. You have to have guidance. You have to have solid foundation. You have to have something to stand on that lifts you up and pushes you forward. And when you don't have that, you're left to just go any way that life will take you. You basically just become a boat without the rudder, and the waves, they just take you and toss you wherever they want. That's life without that. That's life without foundation and structure. And I totally believe that is why God designed it for a man and a woman to come together, because He knew this is the perfect design to make sure that these individuals can be raised in a good home and flourish. So without that, you get what I became. And like I said, I have both my parents, saw that every other weekend, but I did not know how to become the dad that I wanted to be. I knew how to be the dad I didn't want to be. And I was like, well, at least I've got that going for me. So Tori came along in 2008 in June, and Liza was about a year and a half at that time. And I'm looking back at it, and some of it's a little bit foggy, but I have a fairly good memory of them. And it was, there was no plan to have children. life was just unfolding. And so I was just kind of thrown into fatherhood, and that was exciting but scary at the same time. And so through this stuff, I'm just, again, going through life with my ex-wife, and we had, I would say when the girls were, man, I'm trying to remember the ages. I know it was in 2008, so Tori was just a few months old. We had a pretty significant thing take place in our marriage that caused a huge wound for myself. And that began the unfolding of what, how do I put this, a processing system that was going to start taking place in my life. And that wound, I did not know how to address it, because it wasn't just that wound. That wound right there was the cherry on top. That's what made it. What all of the other things that I'd experienced in life, it was like all of these things, and then led up to that event. It wrecked me, and I had no idea how to recover from that. It didn't matter where I turned. Nothing, drugs. I didn't do drugs, but like alcohol, anything like that. That stuff doesn't fix any of those problems at all whatsoever. Tried therapy and all of that, and I think therapy is great. I'm not saying anything bad about therapy. Just something wasn't working for me, and I didn't know why. But I truly believe is that I didn't have an open heart at that point, because I had felt like life had beat me down so bad mentally that I couldn't come out of this shell or whatever it was that was just kind of made me feel locked up here. It was like something was not releasing. So through that, my ex-wife and I tried to make it work for about 2 more years, and that didn't happen, because once again, I didn't know how to forgive, and I didn't know how to process the trauma that was inflicted on that. And so for the next 14 to 15 years or so, this woman was the devil, or so I thought, like so many other guys think. What we don't know is that there's more to the story than that. I was the victim in this situation, and I treated her as such, and then it became this vicious cycle of her and I going back and forth because we now have children, and we both love our children and want to be involved in our children's lives. But there's still this wound that exists that is not coming together. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole lot of back and forth, and because I felt so victimized, I did not treat her the best, and that was a mutual thing. We were both going back and forth for obvious reasons. I was hurt, and out of my wounded heart, this was the source of the wounded heart. Well, guess where my attention was if something was wrong? If it was hard to come back to wholeness again. So I would say about a year and a half ago, I knew there was a problem. I did not know how to fix it. Once again, I started getting around some people that were trying. It was like seeds were being planted along this road. I know God. Like when I look back at it, I know God was doing something in my life. But I know that now. But back then, I didn't know it. I just thought life was continuing to unfold. But there was people that come along the way that were planting little seeds in my mind, and each one of those got to this point. It was like God was just watering that seed that needed to sprout. And I look back at it, and now my mind is blown because my life is totally different. My approach to fathering, my approach to life, work, whatever the case may be. Just like Peter said, Lord, without you, where are we going to go? There is nowhere else to go without God.
So what made the difference? What was the turning point for you? I mean, how did you turn that corner?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to put this in the best way I possibly can to make sense for people to grasp. Obviously, those seeds were being planted, and through reading of books. If you don't read, I can't read. You need to read, because you're getting into someone else's mind, and you're able to take something and you will be able to chew on that thing, and it'll become a part of who you are. But just that internal work had to start taking place. And it was slowly, very slowly. A lot of chaos was taking place in those things within me, and I was causing chaos because out of a wounded heart, chaos ensued. That's all I can say. Sorry, I kind of had a brain fart there.
I was asking you, what happened that changed things? How did you turn the corner from being not so good of a father and co-parent to being the dad you are now?
So there were some significant things that took place in my life right around the time that the shift took place. I got involved in a course called, let me back up, 2022. I was terrified of losing my house because my business was suffering. I had a car detailing business. It was suffering. Thought I was losing everything again. I had already filed bankruptcy once with my ex-wife, and I was reliving all of that trauma all over again because it was like that nerve just kept being hit. And so I'm panicking, and like internally I'm a mess, but no one can see what's going on inside my heart and my mind. No one can see the chaos that I feel. They just see me acting like I'm just crazy. They see me just all over the place. And I was a heart like unhealed. I was not a heart at ease. I was in dis-ease. Well, in my disease started, and ended up getting shingles in November at 37 years old. And I attribute that to the amount of stress that I had been under for all that time. I'm not saying that's what it was, but I don't know what else it could have been. So when that kind of cleared up at the end of 23 into 24, I had just gotten out of a toxic relationship because I was just being a knucklehead and just going through life. Out of my wounded heart, I was attracted to other wounded hearts because we trauma bond, or we just thought that was what was normal. That's just what you do. So I got into this group called Quantum Development Academy, run by a local here in Springfield named Jonathan Slark. I read this book called It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen, and if you guys have never heard of that book, I highly encourage. It Didn't Start With You, and it talks about generational family trauma and how to end the cycle. And there was another book by a guy named Joe Dispenza called Changing the Habit of Being Yourself, or Changing the Habit of Being You. We cannot just walk around saying, oh, that's just the way I am, you have to accept me. If how you are is damaging to other people, people do not have to accept that behavior. Those are called, you put boundaries in place, because those people don't have boundaries. The ones that don't have boundaries or think that you don't have to have boundaries are the ones that need it the most. People should have had boundaries with me because I didn't know how to set boundaries. I had no boundaries because I didn't know what I didn't know. So I got to a point, and I talked to Pastor Kevin one day, and because I was at my wit's end, I was struggling very, very bad mentally. At the beginning of 24, beginning of 23, I think I got my dates mixed up. Beginning of 23 was when everything kind of unfolded with this healing process that took place. I called him because I was done. I was the end of myself. I'm having suicidal thoughts. I'm having feeling overwhelming sense of defeat. Like, if this is what the rest of life is going to be like, I totally understand how people get there. There's the feeling of hopelessness. There's the feeling of defeat, isolation. I was isolating, and again, I'm crying out, and no one can hear that. But there is one who did hear it. And I did not anticipate the unfolding of events that would take place. So called Pastor Kevin, and I said, I don't know what else to do. And I told him, I said, I remember there's one time that you talked about depression in a sermon. I said, and that has never left my mind. I said, I've never thought about me being depressed. I just thought I was all out of whack. So I schedule a doctor. I get off the phone with him. I schedule a doctor's appointment with my doctor, and I walk in and I just explain what's going on. I was like, I have nothing left. I said, I'm done. I'm so done. And he's like, well, talk to me. What's going on? So I start explaining some stuff, how I'm feeling, what's going on, and he prescribes me a medication called Lexapro. I'm not sure if I'm able to name stuff like that, but that's what helped me. So I got the doctor's appointment that day. If I didn't go that day, it was going to be 30 days out, something like that. So not only did I get seen that day, I got the medication that day, and I took it that evening. And all of those things had already been kind of like unraveling things in my mind about why life has gotten to where it has. And it was like all of the seeds started to sprout in my life. And it was like the medication, I don't know what took place, but something felt like it just, the next day, when I say this, like the doctor, he's like, about 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, you'll start experiencing some relief. I'm like, okay, cool. The next day, I remember driving home from somewhere, and I was like, where's that intense, anxious, just I don't want to be alive feeling? I was like, what in the world's going on? I'm like, what's going on? And I had never felt relief like that before. And I just remember coming home, and I sat down, and I'm like, I can relax. I can breathe normal. And I come to the end of, just through that's all unfolding. And through that, I had finished that book. It didn't start with you. And there's this word, abandonment, took place. And I'm like I could feel it in my spirit. I could feel it just down in here. And when I got done reading that book, it was like there was this unveiling on my mind and on my eyes that I could see things clearly with my heart. And I had to look back at the things that unfolded in my life, and I'm like, oh my gosh, man, I had no idea why I was acting the way I did until that night. I mean, I was sitting there with my oldest daughter. She's a witness to this unfolding. And I sat there, and what had come out was, as a husband, I look back at that time and I'm like, man, I understand how things got so bad with my ex-wife. I didn't know how to lead. I didn't know how to be a husband. I didn't know how to be a father. I had those three things against me, or lacking in my life at that point. And I didn't know how to cover them. I didn't know how to, people think that's just an instinctive thing. To an extent it is. But there's also a strategy to do that. There's also a way of doing it. And a lot of it stems from love. Most of it stems from love. But there's more to it than just love. It takes intentionality. It takes action. It takes going, you know what? I've got to take care of me so that I can be the best for you. And there's so many people walk around. Oh, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to ask you how that... I don't know what to call it, that therapy that you'd received, and that prescription that helped you, how did that impact now your ability to be a better co-parent, with your children? And we'll address that after this time out. I'm with Josh Taylor today, and he's my guest on Fathering Strong. We'll be back after this.
Do you know a new father who could benefit from a basic introduction to healthy fathering principles? POPS 101, a free online course consisting of 4 one-hour sessions in English or Spanish, could be perfect for him. POPS 101 lays out practical steps toward becoming the protector, order keeper, provider, and stabilizer his child needs. Learn more at urbanlight.org.
We're back with Josh Taylor. I'm Eli Williams, and this is the Fathering Strong podcast. Josh, you have a fascinating story, and we could go on for a long, long time. And perhaps we'll have you back again to say more about your experience as a co-parent in the midst of the failure of a marriage and all of that, all those other factors involved. Could you spend just a couple of minutes, if you would, and talk about how you're going to get some help from your physician, and the results of that then help you to become a better dad to your children?
Absolutely. I want to go back just real quick. That unfolding helped me to see how much I needed to recover from all those things. And I realized how much I actually hurt my ex-wife and my children and kind of almost abandoned them because of the wound of my heart. It's not an excuse, but it's an understanding to unveil how it got me here where I'm at. Because I had to go to her and say, ego, pride had to be set aside, and I had to be whole enough to come to her and go, I have a really big pill to swallow, and I have to tell you something. And while she's responsible for her actions and the things that she has done, I'm responsible for mine. No one else. So I called her. The night that I'm sitting here with my daughter, I asked her if she wants to watch a movie or an episode, and she says, sure. In a 2-minute span of her being gone, I had this deep welling come up of abandonment. And so once I realized that, once that hit me, there was this extreme conviction that I owe her an apology for my part, not for her part, for my part. And so I called her, and for about 45 minutes, we are on the phone, and she's not having it. Because I've been someone for 14, 15 years to her that I'm all of a sudden, what is going on? And she asked me, she's like, are you having some kind of spiritual awakening or something? And she could not have heard me say yes in that moment. There was a revelation taking place in my mind and my heart. And through that, it's been consistent and consistent and consistent. I'm not going to treat her how her behaviors may dictate, people may say, oh, she doesn't deserve this. I don't care what she deserves. Just the same way God looks at us, he's like, we know what we deserve. That's not how God sees us. And if that's one of his creations, if that's one of his daughters, should I not treat her as such regardless of anything? So I had to tell my daughters the truth. I had to let everything just come out. And when it did, it's been a slow process because she's got a lot of wounds of her own, and I understand that. I don't look at her ill will anymore. I know that she's struggling. I know she is, with some forgiveness and her own wounds. I can't discredit. I cannot discredit those things because I know how it was for me, and so there's grace extended. And my daughter is like, you can, anyone that knows me and sees my daughters and my ex-wife, and they kind of see the whole picture. It's not the same as it used to be. It's not. And I'm not going to treat her based on her responses anymore, because however she responds is how she responds. How I respond is how I respond, and that's what I'm in control of. My daughters see how I respond. They see how I control myself. When I talk to them, I say, look for that kind of man, not the guy I used to be. Look for the guy I am now.
Yeah, and I've heard from some of your friends and people that know you, and they are just amazed at what a good father you have become. So,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, congratulations on fathering strong. So, I want to ask you a final question, Josh. What advice would you give a father who still has children to raise, who is facing separation or divorce? What would be the thing you would want them to think about and do when it comes to his children?
This is what God said to me. He called Adam first. We're the leaders. Lead. Own yourself. Own your stuff. The things that have happened. It may hurt. You may struggle with it. But look within yourself. Stop looking at everyone else. Everyone else is the problem. Look within. Start working on the internal part of yourself. Be honest with your children. When you are struggling, let them know. Belittling them, telling them to shut up, if you do name calling, any of those things, man, you are just speaking words of death. Speak words of life. When you speak words of life to your children, they will become what you say they will. If you tell them they're lovely, they're beautiful, you're a good boy, you're an amazing, you're all of these things are all in love, how do you think they're going to respond? Probably not poorly. We have life and death are in the power of the tongue, and those that love us shall eat thereof it. Speak life. Speak life over them. If you're just tell them the truth. Tell them that you're struggling. If you realize that maybe you were harsh on something, or you're doing something that was an old pattern of behavior, own it and tell them, like, hey, after an intense moment, go back and be like, look, I'm so sorry, I didn't handle that the best. Let them know that, like, you still love them. Reassure them of those things. And that may just seem like common sense, but sometimes people don't receive that, and they don't know how impactful that is. Admit it when you mess up. Set your pride and ego aside and watch them flourish. Watch them come out and tell you when they have someone that's texting them saying that they want to have sex with them. Tell them the truth about yourself, so that they know that telling the truth is okay in the first place, and they're comfortable doing it because they know they can trust you. The only reason that my daughters come to me is because I was honest with them about my own struggles, my own hiccups in life, and all those things. They have literally said to me, they're like, with as honest as you've been with us, we are way more comfortable being honest with you and don't think that you're going to get upset. That's powerful.
Life changing. Yep. Very wise words, Josh. We appreciate that. And that wraps up today's podcast of the Fathering Strong podcast. FatheringStrong.com offers a myriad of resources, including weekly fathering posts. We have a blog that comes out every week. There are devotionals, videos, fatherhood courses, and a whole lot more. And so we invite you to explore FatheringStrong.com today. We want to thank Josh for being our guest today on the Fathering Strong podcast. We appreciate it, Josh.
It was an honor to be here. Come back anytime, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we want to thank our audience for being with us today. We appreciate it. Next week on the Fathering Strong podcast, we'll welcome Jeff Pinkleton. Jeff is the director of the Gathering of Miami Valley of Ohio. That's an organization that's dedicated to connecting men to men and men to God. Jeff and I will discuss the joys and perils of parenting sons, and we hope you'll join us. If you are a dad facing difficulties, I encourage you to reach out for help. Also, reach out to the Heavenly Father for guidance. In situations like Josh's and others, it's important to show respect. And 1 Peter 2:17 says, show respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor. Well, may the Lord bless you as you give your child what no one else on earth can, your fully developed father love. For Josh Taylor and for Bruce Stapleton, who is the unseen genius behind the Wiz's curtain, this has been Fathering Strong. Thank you for joining us.
Fathering Strong is powered by Urban Light Ministries, a not-for-profit organization serving the needs of families and children for nearly 30 years. Your support helps us continue turning the hearts of fathers to their children, while meeting some of the immediate critical needs of struggling families with small children. Contributions of all sizes are welcomed at www.urbanlight.org.
The Fathering Strong podcast is a production of Urban Light Ministries with technical assistance from the Momentum Group. Harold Rayford provides the theme music. Thank you for listening today.